So Emily Dickinson is renowned for what literary readers like to call the compression of her language. A metaphor that might help you here is that you can think of a Dickinson poem as a very small suitcase that when you pop it open, clothes explode out from it, as if someone took the clothes of 30 people and jammed them into one person's little bag. And the question is, how does she create this feeling of compression, this feeling that this poem that looks so short and slight with its with its brief lines and its short stanzas and its dazzling and varied images and its range of metaphoric references and personification and synecdoche and all the tools we've been talking about all semester, how does that end up looking so elliptical, looking so clean and easy, only to come out as something that is deliberately leaving out so much in a way that draws us in? And that's what we really mean by elliptical. Language that is leaving gaps and spaces that create interpretive opportunities for the reader. Interpretive opportunities that Dickinson often refuses to resolve for us. It's this invitation into this world of imagination, but without a pre-designed exit space. So again, another metaphor. She invites you into this fascinating house, but then there's 3 or 4 doors you could choose to get out. Anyway, one good poem that can help us see this powerful compression is it's number 258 in your book. It's on page 1477. There's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it, any. 'Tis the sealed despair, an imperial affliction, sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. And you look at that poem and it's so simple on many levels, full of lovely and then chilling images with these nice disruptive dashes and this very reassuring rhyme scheme. Afternoons, tunes, scar, are, despair, air, breath, death. And it seems simplistic, and the language, it even sits on the page. It takes up so little space on the page even as we look at it. And yet the minute you begin to unpack it, things sort of spiral out of control. This certain slant of life, winter afternoons, seems like a metaphor, but what is it a metaphor for? Is it a metaphor for divinity? Is it a metaphor for inspiration? Is it a metaphor for some kind of epiphany? There's so many possibilities here. And then so many other ideas are introduced. The idea that cathedral tunes can be oppressive suggests that there's some kind of tension here between spirituality and church, which we already know, we've heard about from our introduction. Heavenly hurt it gives us. What a powerful phrase. What does that mean? What is that hurt? What is that heavenly hurt with its alliterative sound about it? It's assonance, actually. Well, no, alliterative. It's the H sounds. What's going on there? That heavenly hurt, it seems sort of obvious, but what is that hurt? What is it? Is it that the inspiration or divine inspiration is so powerful that it hurts us, or is it the oppression that's hurting us? Referred to in the previous line, that reference to internal difference where the meanings are. In many ways, that line sums up Dickinson's whole game, right? She's creating these juxtapositions and gaps and differences that open up meanings that we've got to jump into and explore. And there's so many other ways we can see things unpacking here. The last stanza is kind of interesting, right? Because you get this personification of landscape and shadows, and you get listening and breathing. But then that amazing last line, distance on the look of death. So there's the alliterative sounds there, right? The consonants of distance and death, but also the personification of death. And then what is distance? What is that distance on the look of death? Is that some kind of eternity? Is that something we know? Or is that a way that Dickinson can point to not knowing what death means, not knowing what the face of death looks like, that irresolution, that sense that we don't know what death means, and since we don't know what death means to some degree, we don't know what the boundaries of life are, right? The life of not just the physical life, but the spiritual life. So many things going on in this poem, so many of the great Dickinson themes, all compressed into this tiny little suitcase that when we start opening it up, it becomes frustrating, right? There's so many possibilities. It's like, oh, come on, Emily Dickinson, just tell me what you mean. But that's not her way. Her way is to lure you into opening that suitcase, and then as the clothes explode out onto you, leaving you to figure out how to clean it all up. I know it's a kind of lame metaphor, but I couldn't resist.